Good morning and welcome to the Skinny for Friday, August 8th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, going solo this morning as my colleague Ray Rowe is taking a day off. Ray, we'll see you back. Actually, I'll be back out next week, and that will segue into when we'll both be back here on Friday, August 22nd, 2 weeks from today, when we'll be doing a special live 2-hour debate with the Tampa City Council District 5 seat, which you may be aware of. You're following Tampa politics after the passing of the late Gwen Henderson. There is a special election in Tampa, and there's a lot of debates going on, a lot of candidate forums this month in Tampa for that special election, which is going to take place in early September. We will be doing, along with John Dingfelder, the Down and Dirty Show on Friday, August 22nd, a combined 2-hour program to get all those candidates. And right now, I believe there's 13 candidates in the race, and there may not be that many after qualifying happens next week. But in any event, please tune in for that. And thank you for tuning in for us right now. Later in the program, we're going to talk about the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is going to be hosting a public meeting in North Florida next week to finalize their consideration of the first bear hunt in the state in a decade. Should that happen, we'll be having a discussion with both an opponent and a supporter of that hunt later in the show. But starting out right now, we've got in studio right now, Daryl Roussan is our guest. He, of course, is the St. Petersburg Democrat, serving in his 9th year representing parts of the Tampa Bay area as a state senator. And he's been in the legislature since 2008. And we're happy to have him here in studio to talk about issues going around the state. Good morning, Senator Roussan.
Good morning, Mitch. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here to talk about what's going on. There is so much going on in Florida, but let's get to you directly in terms of your own ambitions. You are term limited next year. There's a lot of talk about maybe you wanting to stay in the legislature by running for the House District 62 seat in the Tampa Bay area. Where are you at on that right now?
Well, it's good to have options, and I believe in experience plus relationship building equals success. And I've been able to have great success both in the House and the Senate. And, things will take care of themselves. Right now, I'm focused on getting back to Tallahassee for this last session and working on things that I've worked on that are still unfinished.
So it sounds like you're probably going to do it.
Well, I'm weighing options, and It's nice to have options.
It absolutely is in life, absolutely. So let's talk about, I think the last time I saw you was in June, actually, at the USF Health facility in the Water Street District of Tampa, where Governor DeSantis was there signing legislation strengthening Florida's Mental Health Act by codifying recommendations by Florida's Commission on Mental Health and Substance Use Disorder in January, a panel that you served on. I guess let's talk about that first, and we'll talk about the naming of the facility there. But so tell me about that bill, because I know this is an issue very dear to you.
Well, Senate Bill 1620 implements the work from the Commission on Mental Health, of which I was a member. It strengthens care by requiring regular treatment plan reviews, standardizes assessments for children and adolescents, and improves discharge planning to ensure patients leave treatment with support in place, particularly as it relates to long-acting injectables or medications. It was just a way of improving access to care, improving the quality of care, and supporting recovery after primary treatment. And I'm very proud of this work. It's legacy work. For 17 years, I've been in the legislature. At first, when I got there, substance use disorder and mental health was stigmatized, and there were very few discussions about that or debates. But now it's become routine.
Yeah, much more common, easier, and in our society as well, of course. This is now, let's see, it's the... as I said, is a Center for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Research at USF's Luis de la Parte Florida Mental Health Institute. And they are going to name the legislature, and Governor DeSantis, when he was here in June, announced that the facility's going to be named after you. Is that correct?
That's what the governor announced, and the Senate president was there to second that motion. And President Rhea Law, with the vice chair of the Board of Trustees, Michael Griffin, was there to second it also. It's not about the naming. It's about the work that's going to get done there. And that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think some of our listeners might recall who pay, maybe more attention than they should be in terms of the legislature, because a lot goes on up there that it's, you don't really hear about or read about unless you're really following it closely. But there was a bit of a kerfuffle, shall we say, in the legislature one of the last weeks of the session there, when we just said, this legislation that includes naming of this facility at USF after you, the Senate. All of a sudden, I guess it was going back and forth between the House and Senate, this bill, and it got stripped out by the House. And, I didn't know that until we were hearing this discussed in the Senate. And your colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, took extreme umbrage about this. And they were very angry. And you said at the time, look, it is about the legislation. It's not about me, the naming of this facility after me. But, that was kind of interesting. And I guess it had to be nice for you, right? Because you had a lot of your colleagues there, again, as I said, both sides of the aisle who were coming to your we're very unhappy that it looked like the House is going to screw you over, frankly.
Well, it was a very humbling experience to have the support of the Senate en masse. And, it's because of the work that I've done. It's because of the body of work that I've done. And I need to thank Rubenstein Law, my employer, Florida's premier personal injury law firm, for supporting my public service all of these years.
Yeah. And that's, the law firm you work at, that's interesting because I remember I had Rick Kreisman on here over a decade ago before he ran for mayor when he was a state legislator. And he was telling me that he was going to be leaving his law firm at the time because they weren't going to have him, basically, because he was gone for so long, right? The thing about the legislature, which you make less than $30,000 a year, it's supposedly, quote unquote, a citizens legislature. It's anything but that, because in fact, unless you have a willing employer who's cool with you missing months at a time, because obviously with committee meetings, that goes for at least 4 months, not just the 2 months of the session. Who could do that, right? Who could have a job that can do that unless you're wealthy or you're an attorney? There's a lot of attorneys in the legislature. I've noticed that.
Yes, there are. And it's a testament to the engagement, the civic responsibility that Rubenstein Law has. Okay. That they support me.
All right. We're definitely getting the ad in for the law firm there. Okay. Again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:13. You're listening here to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm Mitch Perry, sitting here with State Senator Darrell Rouson from the Tampa Bay area. And he'll be here for a while here. I want to open the phones up. Maybe if you want to talk to a legislator here, we've got one here in studio for the next 20 minutes or so. 813-239-9663. You can also send us an email at dj@wmnf.org. Okay. Let's go to the big news nationally and in Tallahassee as of yesterday, and that is redistricting. House Speaker Daniel Perez yesterday sent out a memo to his members that was dutifully reported on by the members of the press. That looks like they're going to now, the legislature is going to be serious here. This is something that nobody talked about all year long. Certainly when you guys were in the legislature in January and February. Not even Ron DeSantis signed the budget in late June. It was not on his radar. But then, of course, President Trump freaking out about the fact that the Republicans might lose control of the House of Representatives next year, demands of Texas Governor Greg Abbott, hey, why don't you find 5 seats for me to redistrict so we have a bit of a bump. California says they're going to follow suit. We don't know about that yet because they do have an independent commission. New York, we don't know about that. Apparently, actually, we do know they won't be able to do it until 2028. This is not looking good for Democrats nationally overall. Here in Florida, Darrell Rouson, we haven't heard from your leader, Senate President Ben Albrin. He was quiet yesterday. I reached out to his office, and he didn't respond. But Perez has responded. They're going to have a select committee starting, I guess, in the fall to discuss this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the Senate President is being very thoughtful and deliberate about his actions. And there's no urgency to do this now. We've got a lifetime between now and October when we get back for committee weeks. And we should study what's happening in Texas and in California and the other states like New York that are intending to do some things. We shouldn't be knee-jerk reactors to what other states are doing. We need to do what's good for Florida.
I was in Orlando last Saturday for the Republican had their all day, what they called the Florida Freedom Forum, I think it was called, in the daytime. Then they had an event in the evening, went there in the daytime. And it wasn't universal amongst some of the members of Congress who were there that they thought this was necessarily a great idea. Byron Donalds was up on stage. He was asked about it. He was very careful, as lawmakers were during the past redistricting, when you were told basically don't really comment about this because of the lawsuit that happened back in 2012, if you recall, after Florida Fair Districts amendments were passed. Well, let me just ask you on a personal level, though. Okay, we've got 28 members of Congress right now, 20 Republican. Now, I think it was Punchbowl News, which covers Congress. They came out with a story yesterday saying that they think Florida is going to get 3 more Republicans out of this, and that the Republicans are looking at getting rid of or trying to hurt Jared Moskowitz and Debbie Wasserman Schultz in South Florida, perhaps Darren Soto in Central Florida, and maybe if they want to get really greedy, coming after Kathy Castor here in the Tampa Bay area. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the GOP should tread very carefully, because if they try to stretch their advantage too thin, it could backfire in ways that they don't foresee right now. For example, if they diminish the margins for incumbent Republicans, thinking they are safe, small shifts in the future could make districts competitive and give an advantage to the Democrats to gain more seats.
And we should say also, there is, I think we just mentioned, in the Fair District Amendments, which explicitly say you can't gerrymander, basically. You can't redraw a district to help a political party, which is why back during the last, 2022, the Republican legislature was very careful about that. I really know this because I went to this federal trial that was held about your Senate seat, which we'll talk about in a minute, and got to hear all the inside work about how the Florida Senate, anyway, went about redrawing up districts, and they were so conscious of the Florida Fair District Amendment, right? Because it is a constitutional part. It is part of our Constitution, and I do think that's going to be interesting. Ron DeSantis, I think he's trying to get out of that by saying that, well, we need to update our numbers in terms of the census, right? And I know we heard Donald Trump say yesterday, apparently in a posting, that he wants a new census done. Again, a lot of things that we don't know about there with that. Anyway, we'll move on from there. Okay, another big story this summer, Senator Rouson, is, of course, immigration nationally and here in Florida. And we've got this facility in South Florida called Alligator Alcatraz that is extremely controversial. I don't know if you've been there. I know some of your colleagues attended there when they were allowed the opportunity to a few weeks ago. By the way, we did have a court ruling yesterday by a federal judge, saying that there can be no more physically work done on that facility for a couple of weeks. Doesn't mean that the camp is still not going, because it very much is. Your thoughts about?
Well, I have not attended. I didn't go because I didn't want to gloss over pre-planned viewing of what they wanted us to see.
Right.
I'd rather wait for the court opinion that allows us to go to have unfettered access at any time we decide to go. But I'm disturbed about the reports that I hear coming from out of there about the hygiene, about the access to quality care. When we hold someone in custody or we detain a person, that doesn't strip them of their humanity, and we should hold them in dignity and in safety.
Yeah, and by the way, we should say that regarding the facility itself. Oh, about visiting. Like you said, you didn't visit when they had the approved visit for the lawmakers a few weeks ago. As you well know, in Department of Corrections, which is what runs our facilities, which is not running Alligator Alcatraz, you can go at any time to visit a facility, a prison facility, corrections facility, without warning anybody about that.
That's right.
Yeah. And so they can get around this because it's not being run by the Department of Corrections. It's running by the Department of Emergency Management. And is that being so that's why when the lawmakers originally, some of your colleagues wanted to go, way back when the facility first opened, they were denied entrance and they were said, well, that part of the law doesn't exist because it's not the Department of Corrections running this. And it's like, okay, you're right, but it's still a facility, detention facility being run by the state of Florida.
The issue is being litigated, and I'm anxious to hear what the court has to say about ownership of the facility and access to it by legislators, since it's the citizens' money, taxpayer dollars, that have paid for this to go up.
Over $225 million the last time it was reported on. We've got a phone caller here. Let's try to do this again. If you can call in, speak to Senator Rahsaan here. He's here for about 10, 15 more minutes here on 88.5 FM. So let's go to our phones. We've got, let's see here if I can. Okay, hold on a second. There's an issue with the computer mouse here. Okay, so I'm trying to get over there, folks. Okay, so we will. There we go. Okay, so okay, Layla, I believe it is.
Yes.
Hi, Layla. You're on 88.5 FM.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Darrell Rahsaan for his years of service, and no matter what you do in the future, you will do it well, and you are a good person. And thank you for your calm demeanor and steadfast conviction on speaking up on the Dozier School for Boys and the long due retribution that took place because of your efforts. And I just admire you as a person, and I wish all of our high school kids and all of our elementary kids could know you as a person, because you are a leader that needs to be recognized throughout the state of Florida for your good deeds. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We don't do this for glory. We do it because we're passionate about the work. And I thank you for complimenting me. It's always nice to hear that you're appreciated by the folks for the work that you've done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Layla. And she does bring up a great point, or an issue, that is Dozier School for Boys. So where are we at? So to remind our listeners, if they're not familiar with that House of Horrors that went on for, I don't know, close to a century here. It's been well documented, of course. You had been working very hard in recent years in the legislature and got the big victory last year in the legislature, $20 million basically for the victims, the surviving victims, which, of course, will never make them whole for those who are alive. So, Senator Rahsaan, where are we at? And do you know exactly how many actually qualified? We know it took a while after that legislation passed because the state had to ferret out the folks and make sure that those people who said they deserve, some financial remuneration were actually at Dozier. How many people do you know are roughly going to be getting compensation?
Approximately 900 were approved, and they've already received checks of $21,000 apiece out of the appropriated $20 million. It was apportioned depending upon the number of people who applied. There were about 10 that appealed the denial, and therefore $150,000 was held back in case they get approved. And if they don't get approved, then that money will be sent apportionately to the ones who've already received checks.
Wow, so 900. Now, interesting, because I thought I heard numbers that'd be like half of that. But that's really interesting.
Yeah, we never knew exactly how many would be applying, but it was estimated to be 300 to 400.
Right. And it was 3 times that, or at least 900. Wow, interesting. Yeah. So that's going to be in terms of this whole the fight that you did on behalf of the surviving victims. Is that's the end of the line now? I mean, obviously, it's taken a while just to get the state to recognize this. Years ago. So I know you maybe wanted to get more money.
Well, as you said earlier, there's no amount of money that could compensate them for the pain that was inflicted, the injuries, psychological and physical, that they suffered, even some of them unto death. They did not get proper burials, and some of them still have not been located. So no matter what we appropriate, it doesn't pay them for what they went through, but it helps. And that's the only way we have in our system of justice to honor and recognize their suffering.
Yeah, indeed. Again, so we're talking right now with Tampa Bay Area State Senator Darrell Rahsaan, a Democrat who's been in the Florida legislature since 2008. I guess you're actually the longest legislator going consecutively, right? Because you got the extra 2 years.
The longest Democrat.
Democrat. Oh, is there somebody Republican-wise who's been there, like running since or in office since 2000?
I believe so.
Okay. Do we know who that is, or do you remember? Okay, the Democrat anyway. But yeah, because of term limits, right? Let's talk about term limits for a moment. Again, so basically Florida, 30 years ago, more than 3 years ago, voted for quote unquote 8 is enough. 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate. Sometimes in your case, you got an extra couple years because of the way we do it, right? After there's redistricting, 10 of the 20 senators run 1 year and then or a 2-year period. The other senators run the next period. So you got a couple extra years in the Senate, but you are term limited out after next year. We talked about at the beginning of the program. Of course, you are considering running for the House District 62 seat. But there's a Tampa Tiger Bay debate a couple months ago, and you were part of that panel that discussed strictly about term limits. And it's been an issue that people talk about, people write about. It's not going to really go anywhere because it doesn't seem to be very popular. Governor DeSantis is really intent about, he wants term limits for members of Congress, which is, a different issue. But there's pros and cons, obviously, about this. One of the cons certainly is that it's insane, right? In terms of look at the Florida House of Representatives. I guess the Senate as well, where people are voting on because they're only going to be there for 4 terms, 8 years in the House. Then freshman class, they vote on who's going to be the House Speaker 6 years from now, which just seems just silly. But they do it like that. And it's been said before. I think you said this even at the Tiger Bay discussion, which is the lack of institutional knowledge means that it's the staffers, it's the lobbyists, there's people who are perennial, people who live in Tallahassee full time, okay, who don't show up, just when they serve, who they're the ones who really have a lot of clout and power up there because of that.
And if you build relationships with them, it helps you as you discover the legislative process. I often say experience plus relationships equals success in the legislature. And term limits seem like they're here to stay.
I think that's really a safe thing to say here. I've got a note from somebody who's basically asking about Hope Florida. This person writes, I'm very curious about the $10 million that the government got caught embezzling. What happened? That is, I think it's a reference to the whole Hope Florida controversy regarding the $10 million that came from the settlement from Centene that ultimately went to political groups that ultimately went to anti-amendment 3, right? The marijuana constitutional amendment last year, convoluted. I do know this. There was a story that came out. I don't know if you saw this, Senator Rasan, a couple of days ago. I think Politico was the only one who reported on it, that there was all these documents that were released regarding this controversy. It didn't seem to change much to me reading the story, but nevertheless, I know there are Ron DeSantis supporters out there. I follow them on Twitter who are basically celebrating this. They said, hey, this shows bad reporting by the press and that, there was no real scandal there. What are your thoughts about the whole Hope Florida situation?
Well, the whole idea behind Hope Florida was a good idea. No organization is above scrutiny. If they acted in good faith and everything is above board, then an investigation will find that out and they will be lauded. If there was bad faith and questionable dealing, then an investigation will show that too. So no organization is above scrutiny.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing, right? Because Governor DeSantis doesn't say too often these days, but he goes out and talks about how it's saved 33,000 people is the number that they always throw out there, and it saves the government $100 million. And I just don't know if that's been proven or not. But it is interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of politics behind that with the situation about the First Lady running for office. Let's talk about Byron Donalds for a minute, because you served with him, right?
I did serve with him, and he was a good member of the Legislative Black Caucus, he and Jennifer Carroll.
Right, as Republicans, along with mostly Democrats who are in the caucus. And
their viewpoint was very important to the caucus's maneuvering.
So what do you make of the fact that as of now, we're a long way away, a year away from the primary election, but he is by far right now the leading candidate to become the next Republican governor, which in a red state like Florida means he's the leading candidate to become the next governor of Florida. What are your thoughts about that?
I just appreciate the fact that he wishes to continue to serve. It's not easy being in public office and living a public life. So those who are willing to get into the fray and set out avenues for that ought to be commended.
Okay, again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:30. You're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm Mitch Perry, senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, speaking with Tampa Bay Area Democratic State Senator Darrell Rouson. In a few minutes, we're going to segue to a different topic, talk about the proposed bear hunt that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is going to be discussing next week. But we've got a few more minutes with the senator here, and welcome your input if you'd like. Let's see here. We do have another phone call. This is DeAndre, I believe, calling in from Brandon. Hi, DeAndre.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. I have a question specifically for you, Mr. Rouson. You've been in public works for like a while, and so far back as the time of HRS, when it was in Florida, and then by, I think, 2008 put down. My question is, is Hope Florida essentially a kind of other HRS? And if so, how did it compare to what we're seeing out of Hope Florida? I'm just really curious because...
Well, I don't know that Hope Florida is considered comparable to HRS. I know that they had navigators within DCF that helped the mission and aim of Hope Florida. But look, the House has studied this. There is an investigation. Like I say, if everything was above board and appropriate, it will find that out. No organization is above scrutiny or questioning.
I'm primarily inquiring because, how do I say this? I'm primarily inquiring because the Republicans have a habit of trashing programs and for ignoring citizens' needs, right, for whatever their agenda is. But when it comes back to them, then they try to prop something up and say, hey, we're doing something now. You know what I mean? It's like a sleight of hand sort of a deal. So that's why I asked. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, DeAndre. I wanted to ask you before we let you go here, your Senate seat is actually the subject of a federal trial about gerrymandering, right? Racial gerrymandering. I actually covered it back in June. If listeners aren't familiar, so Senator Rouson, your Senate seat comprises parts of St. Petersburg and then goes across Tampa Bay to more of Hillsborough, I believe, right? There's more of Hillsborough County in your district than Pinellas.
Yeah, Hillsborough represents 60% of my district, while Pinellas and St. Pete represent 40%. And I have the unique perspective of representing both downtowns. So I'm watching the growth and the development in these areas.
Yeah, and what was there was a group of plaintiffs from Hillsborough and Pinellas who, along with the ACLU of Florida and another organization, filed a lawsuit after the 2022 redistricting, saying that Senate seat that you're in right now was illegally racially gerrymandered. And so, again, there was a federal trial of a three-judge federal court, a panel of judges back in Tampa in June. 4-day trial. I covered it. It was really, like I said earlier, because if nothing else, I learned the insides, and it was very complicated about how reapportionment, redistricting work, and how the lead witness of that case for the Senate, because the Senate was on trial there, was a man who was the guy who drove the maps up, basically. And it was very, very interesting. We'll see where it goes. Let me ask you this, because there were one of the plaintiffs from the Tampa area. The reason they said that they were hurt by the way this district was drawn, which of course had nothing to do with you, or you were not involved with the writing and drawing up the district at all. You just wanted to run in it, and you won the seat there. Was that I'm not getting fair representation because my lawmaker, he's based in St. Petersburg. In this case, you do live in St. Pete. I don't know where to see him. And then there was other people saying, some days, one year he has to go cover the MLK parade in Pinellas, another year in Hillsborough. He's not here all the time. We're not getting a full representation because we're separated by literally Tampa Bay. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I've done my level best to represent both sides of the Bay efficiently and effectively. And I think I've done a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, I think you. And I know. Were you asked to testify in that trial at all? Or?
No, I was not.
Yeah,
and it's in the courts.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying representing the district. the diversity of the district, both in terms of economic status, in terms of racial status, and in terms of small businesses versus big businesses. And it's a diverse district. I represent Apollo Beach, Riverview, Brandon, all of Ybor City, large chunks of Sulphur Springs, Jackson Heights, Seminole Heights, Robles Park, and East Tampa, right down to downtown Tampa.
You used to have a district that also included Manatee and even Sarasota counties, I believe, right?
Well, that was when I was in the House.
Right. You talk about crazy redrawing of districts. Hey, last thing before we let you go here, Nikki Fried is basically, Florida Democratic Party Chair Nikki Fried is asking Democrats right now, as his party tries to come out of the wilderness, should we have an open primary when the primary elections take place, which, and this possibly could happen a year from now. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm not opposed to an open primary. I think that the voters are smart voters. They will research the candidates, research the issues, and then make their decision. And I trust the voters.
Yeah, we'll wait and see about that. Okay, we'll leave it there. Again, Darrell Roussan, anything else you want to say before we let you go, Senator?
I want to thank you very much, Mitch, for what you do, and they need to pay you more money.
Yes, I'm a volunteer here at MNF. Anyway, Senator Darrell Roussan, the Tampa Bay area state senator, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you coming across the bay this morning.
Thank you, and thank you to my law firm.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on here. All right, James Scott, we're hopefully going to be coming here in a minute. So we're going to switch gears, although we're talking about something that's very big deal here amongst all Florida voters and people who care about the environment, what have you. We're going to talk about Florida. The state of Florida is considering a bear hunt, potentially the first in a decade, with a vote scheduled within the next week to finalize the proposal. So if approved by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, it would take place in December and would involve a limited number of permits issued through a lottery system with a one bear, one permit limit here. And so we're going to have folks talking both for and against this measure, very much so. And joining us right now, so let me make sure I get this all set up here properly here. So we have, in fact, got in studio right now joining us is James Scott. He is I believe this is your current title, James, the Executive Committee Chair of the Suncoast Sierra Club.
I'm on the executive committee of Suncoast Sierra Club. I am not the chair.
Okay. And also via Zoom, we have Maria Davidson. She's a carnivore biologist with the Safari Club International Foundation. Maria, are you with us?
I am. I'm here. Thank you.
Hey, great to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We should tell our listeners, Maria Davidson, she's also the former large carnivore program manager for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. So we really are happy to have her here with us. And I know Maria wants to talk after you begin this on James. So let's talk about this. The details are the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is going to have a meeting, I believe it's on Wednesday, I think August, right?
Wednesday and Thursday.
Oh, okay, yeah, it could be 2 days, up in Havana, which is near the capital, somewhere up there in North Florida. And I think maybe you can talk about, you're trying to get some folks to even go up there for the meeting. There was a earlier meeting on this back in the springtime. Was it? May, okay, you're right. So again, this is happening, or could happen in terms of what the commission's going to decide. And the Sierra Club, which you represent, is against this. Basically, tell us why you don't think this is a good idea.
Well, thank you for having me today. Many, many years ago, there was over 11,000 bears in Florida. And back in the 70s, we realized they were about to go extinct. And so some major protections went into place, especially in the 90s. And as of 2015, we believe we've rebounded them to about 4,000, which is still about a third of what they used to be. And back in December, the staff at the FWC gave a presentation to the commission and explained where the bears were at. And basically, it was a success story with a couple caveats. And the main caveat being that Florida has 7 unique subpopulations across the state. And 4 of those are supposedly growing. 3 of them we do not know. 3 of them are well below the 200 bear threshold. One of the 7 BMUs in Florida only has 30 bears, supposedly. So number one, that data is 10 years old, and it's not going to be refreshed until 29 or 30. So by the time, if this hunt does get approved, we are going to have, the data is already 10 years old now. the key to Florida's black bear recovery is that you need to, the goal for the state is to reconnect those 7 subpopulations. Because right now you have 7 distinct genetic populations. 3 of them are below 200 bears, which means they're at genetic risk of collapse, of inbreeding and collapse. And so the growth of the other 4 BMUs, the bear management units, and for those bears to use, and we've invested so much money into our wildlife corridors, so that way wildlife, big wildlife like bears, can traverse the state and mix and maintain a healthy population. So this is grossly premature because the bears will not be recovered in the state of Florida until all 7 bear management units are at least above 200 bears, 3 of which are definitively not. And so, what happened in December, they gave a great presentation, and then Commissioner Gary Lester said, come back with the hunt. He didn't say, tell us if a hunt is a good idea. Show us these numbers. He said, I want you to come back with the hunt. And that's what staff did. And they came back and they justified it. That's their job, is to follow the directive of the commission. And so they came back and said, well, you can do it. Here's how. And that's not scientific consensus. That's not scientific justification. And now they've bent over backwards, fanning out across the state in recent weeks, explaining that they're making basically, this is a preemptive attempt to, because the bear population might exceed carrying capacity one day. They don't even have carrying capacity numbers. And so nobody has said that bears have run out of habitat. Nobody said there's too many bears. A lot of folks complain about bear-human interactions. The FWC itself admits that hunting does not reduce bear-human conflict. And so there's no scientific justification. This is driven by the commission, specifically Gary Lester. And there's no benefit to public safety. And 3 of the 7 bear units are still under population goals. And so this is a political attempt to give a handout to privatize the bear hunt. People keep talking about the lottery. The lottery is actually, this is a bait and switch. The lottery is not the main event, it's the public lands program.
Okay, so let's tell our listeners there is a lottery. So people right now, oh wait, and we shouldn't say anything. Nothing's happened yet on this. But if this was approved, there would be a lottery so people could participate. There's only X amount of spots there. What, 187?
This year.
Okay. So if this were to be approved by the commission, there would be a lottery, and it's going to cost people, what, $5 to participate?
$5 per application. You can give unlimited applications. You can submit as many as you want, whatever you can afford.
Okay, so you can stuff the ballot box, as it were, but there will only be 187 positions there. So I'm just cut. I want to make sure the listeners know about that. So going back, though, you're saying this is not about the lottery. You're saying
the lottery is being sold as the main event in the rules. If you read the fine print, there is a private lands bear harvest program. And what that program does is it takes effect next year. And if you are a landowner with more than 5,000 acres, you can qualify for up to 3 bear tags. The same restrictions that are placed on regular hunters do not apply. You can use bait. You can hunt a bear. You can shoot a bear point blank over bait on private lands, not in public lands. And there's a 3-month, the 3-week season for the public. There's a 3-month season for private lands. It's a separate system. And so the public, and especially hunters, are being sold this public lottery. But if you look at a lot of other states with very high demand game species like moose or elk, what happens is they set up programs that start off majority public lottery, and they bake in a private lands program. And over time, that private lands program grows because there's a real profit incentive there. Trophy hunting is a big industry. These are really rich folks who fly to Africa and kill cheetahs and giraffes for fun. And these are the same folks who are going to want to turn Florida's bear hunt into a privatized trophy hunt. There's no cap on that program, and there's no limits on that program. And so if you read the fine print of the rules and make your own judgment, that program is going to subsume the public lottery. So the hunters are being sold a public lottery this year, but that program takes effect next year. And mark my words, if these rules pass as written, if they don't cap or eliminate that program over time, that private lands program will be the name of the game. And if you're a hunter that wants to kill a bear in Florida, you're going to have to go to a private landowner and fork over thousands of dollars to engage in a luxury bear killing experience.
Well, that is certainly an interesting element of this that I hadn't been that aware of. So I think we'll leave it right there. Let's go now to Maria Davidson. Maria, I know you want to, let's hear what you have to say about this.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to speak up on behalf of hunters everywhere. And there's some rhetoric that is taking place that is somewhat disingenuous and including arguments against the bear hunt specifically on a broader level. For instance, the private lands. Florida is not unlike many southern states that private landowners are in fact responsible for most of our wildlife now, simply because states are mostly privately held landowning tracts. So the fact that FWC is choosing a mechanism that allows private landowners to benefit from the wildlife that they support, out of their own pocket, to me is not a negative thing. It's just an additional opportunity or an alternative opportunity. The important thing that people immediately switch from, and they use other arguments, is that the biology is sound in Florida. The data is current. Some of it can be 10 years old, but for bear populations to return to any one area every 10 years is the norm. Bears populations do not vary so dramatically that 10 years makes a huge difference, on top of which FWC has other monitoring mechanisms in place if something were to happen, and whatever that something may be. If there was a huge food failure or disease outbreak or what have you that changed that population significantly during those intervals, there's other monitoring activities in place that would capture that, and they would discover it long before they circled back with their next hair snare effort in that area. The number of tags being issued in Florida is at a level that doesn't even stop the population growth. It has the intent of slowing the population growth. Wildlife populations are similar to trying to navigate large-scale changes in direction. So you're much better off doing it incrementally in the way that FWC has proposed, wanting to slow that population growth so that you don't see other effects taking place. Bear populations are such that they don't really self-regulate. Bears will take advantage of any food source available, whether it be human-caused or not, and they will continue to grow in their core areas and just spill over into unsuitable habitat. Unsuitable habitat for bears, across the country is defined as, road-dense, human-habituated, or human pressured landscapes, which of course Florida has plenty of. So in order to slow that, you slow the population growth, which is exactly what FWC has done. And it was the recommendations from the biologists within the FWC to do that, to implement a harvest so that you slowed that growth. The best case scenario for Florida or any other bear population is to manage those numbers at suitable levels in suitable habitat. And so we applaud FWC for doing just that. Even when you have emotional arguments that, this is only a trophy hunt and this is only for the rich and all the other negative connotations that I've seen out there, it's just simply not true. It is responsible bear management.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM in Tampa. I'm Mitch Perry. We're talking about the proposed bear hunt that may be happening later this year in Florida for the first time in a decade. There's going to be a hearing next week held up in Havana, Florida, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. The voice you just heard, that was Maria Davidson. She's a carnivore biologist with the Safari Club International Foundation. Before we go back to James Scott, the Sierra Club, James had mentioned this idea of, I want to make sure I say this right, about the subpopulation, these different groups, the 7 different groups he mentioned. Several of them are less than, I think you said 200 bears that were around. Can you comment on that, Maria?
You are correct. Not all of the different bear regions have the numbers that FWC suggests they would support, which is why they are not suggesting, even with this hunt, that they hunt in all of those units. They are only hunting in the units that they feel like that population growth would benefit from being slowed to a point where you have fewer bears spilling out into human-dominated landscapes. The genetic component that we have discussed earlier, the genetics in the Florida black bear are not in question. They certainly have enough interchange that they can remain genetically strong. And so connecting them across landscapes where the pressure from humans is just so great might actually not be possible to have complete connection. But it's been proven time and again across the country that you truly don't need very many dispersing individuals to move from one subpopulation to the next in order to keep the genetic diversity at a very high level. If male bears can get across the landscape and move between those subpopulations, even at very small numbers, the genetic health remains above any type of negative consequences.
James Scott with the Sierra Club, we care to respond here?
Yeah, so there's a way of measuring genetic health. I forget the exact metric and how they do that, but the 3 BMUs that are below 200, 2 of those are below genetic health. I believe it's like 2.0. If you're below 2.0, it's not genetically healthy, you're at risk of collapse. Above 2.0, you're sustainable. 2 of those 3 BMUs are below the threshold of genetic health, so they are at risk. And so I would challenge the premise that they're okay. They're not. The other BMUs, yes, they are above the threshold. They're doing well, but 2 of them are not. And the concept of spillover, that's why Floridians have invested millions into the wildlife corridor. We need the bears to spill over from the big BMUs to the small ones to provide those genes to those struggling BMUs. Those two subpopulations. This is the story of the bear in Florida. Is we must create a statewide population again. What makes us unique about compared to other states that have bear hunting is that we're this huge state with this huge urban sprawl issue, and our bear populations are fragmented in a way that's genetically isolated. And so, we need the bears to grow in those BMUs. And the concept of needing to slow growth of the populations, when the staff gave their presentation in December on the bears, they said that populations for the bears are healthy, with the exception of the 3 BMUs that are below recovery levels, and that there's plenty of suitable habitat. And so it wasn't until the Commissioner Lester said, bring me back a bear hunt. That was the moment when the FWC staff was required and directed to reverse engineer justification. And all this talk about needing to slow the growth rate and that the bears are fine. And, these are arguments that were manufactured after the political appointees required it. And so the bears are not okay.
Maria Davison, I want to go to you. You follow this, I'm sure, nationally. How many other states do these type of bear hunts? Do you know that?
I do. So, among the states that have a sustainable black bear population, there's only 2 or 3 that are not hunting them. And in fact, when these bear managers meet at regional meetings, one of the topics that continues to come up is their inability to manage these populations at levels that they consider sustainable, meaning that harvest levels are not keeping up with the bear population growth itself. And Florida is trying to get ahead of that issue by doing just what they're doing now with a very conservative harvest that's only 5% of those subpopulations. And in fact, they don't say that they have any intention of increasing that percentage, or at least I have not heard that. So the other states that are working on this, Louisiana being a really good example of that, we're not back in the turn of the century. So much of the arguments I hear that bears have not been restored across their historic range. And the reason for that is their historic range no longer exists in the same way it did in the turn of the century. It's human dominated now, and therefore really not suitable to host a bear population like it did back in the day. And the subpopulations that remain in Florida are certainly returning to levels that are sustainable within the different subpopulations. And the BMUs we're discussing here certainly have not experienced any type of genetic bottleneck, and they are certainly not in any danger of collapse in any way, shape, or form, which has been shown with the Florida work.
Again, that's Maria Davidson with the Safari Club International Foundation. James Scott with the Sierra Club. Back to you. I'm wondering if some of the bad feelings that folks have about this goes back to in the last bear hunt we had, which was 10 years ago, which I just read about. I don't even remember reading about at the time, but certainly have since then. And that was halted after just 2 days due to the rapid harvest of bears, with 295 bears killed out of a 320 limit. And there's just a lot of people said that was just really handled really poorly. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was handled poorly. They gave out thousands of permits and only had a quota of a few hundred, and folks just ran out and wanted to kill the first bear they could see because they wanted to, to get their kill. And there was, it was a huge black eye for the commission. The agency is still kind of traumatized by that event, and it was humiliating for them. And we haven't had a bear hunt since. It's been 10 years,
right.
And the one before that was 20 years before that. And so in 1994, I believe. And so, the commission is really cagey on this. This is something that if this bear hunt does move forward, this is going to undermine their reputation. Based on their own survey, 3/4 of Floridians are against this bear hunt. It also includes things that were not allowed last hunt, which is like hounding and baiting right over bait stations. Hounding, bears are one of the only animals that climb trees when you want to kill them. That means if you're shooting a bear in a tree, that means bullets in the sky. It means bears running across the landscape. Baiting, shooting a bear right over a bait station. Also, archery is going to be allowed. So this hunt is, they're calling it more conservative, more regulated. There's no check stations. So I would disagree with the premise that this hunt is somehow going to be a lot better. And also because of the embarrassment that came last time with the bear hunt, these rules permanently delegate authority to authorize future bear hunts to the executive director, which means that this issue, if these rules passed as written, this issue will never have to come back to the commission again in terms of authorizing annual hunts, bear harvest zones, quotas, etc. And so the commission is going to punt this issue to staff and never have to have a public meeting about it again if they don't want to. And the quota they have this year of 187, they're lowballing that number this year, and they're making it all about the public lottery to give the public and hunters especially the impression like, hey, this is a modest issue. This is a modest number. It's the public lottery.
Yeah.
Well, wait till 5 years from now. That number is going to be a lot higher, and you're going to have a private lands program taking over that lottery, and the hunters are going to get shut out.
Maria Davidson, we only have a couple minutes left here, so maybe your last pitch here, and if you want to respond to anything that James Scott just said there, or your last words in terms of this issue.
Sure, I'd love to. So it's unfortunate that the last hunt has always been painted as a failure because they had clearly set out harvest goals which were met. And so in terms of a failure, it was not. They met their harvest goals. But the also strange thing is one of the biggest criticisms of the last hunt is the bears that were killed and the sex ratio and that kind of thing. That was 100% resolved with this coming hunt, in that it's a finite number. It can only be that tagged number. The bait and the hounds also address the specific concerns pointed out at the last hunt because it allows a hunter to be incredibly particular in choice of the animal they choose to harvest. When you have bait, it gives you a lot of time to choose which animal you're going to harvest. Same thing with dogs. When you have a bear in a tree, you can choose to harvest that bear or not. You also have a tag in your pocket. There is no rush. You don't have to pick the first bear you see. You have all the time in the world to choose the appropriate bear, which the hope is that it will skew that harvest towards prime adult males, right? Which is exactly one of the biggest criticisms they had for the last harvest. So those criticisms were addressed in the methods that FWC chose to pursue.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Maria Davidson, she's a carnivore biologist with the Safari Club International Foundation. Ms. Davidson, thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny.
Thank you.
And James Scott, James, last word for listeners here who are maybe want to know more about this meeting. What's the information you can provide?
If you want to come with us to Tallahassee or to Havana, just Google Sierra Club, hop on the bear bus. There's a statewide protest tomorrow. Google Bear Defenders, statewide protest tomorrow across the state from 10 to 12. And show up in Havana, have your voice heard. And remember, there's no honor or tradition in killing a bear over a pile of donuts. This is a political move. It's not good for bears. It's not good for public safety. And the FWC cares about bears and cares about people. They'll educate the public, and they will help people secure their trash, and they'll secure habitat.
Thank you so much. Okay, that's going to do it for us. You are listening to WMNF 88.5 FM. Want to thank Skip Sassy on the engineering. Madeline Rosa was answering the phone today. Joe Ellen Schilke is coming up next, the hostess of the Mostess. Want to thank you all for listening. Please stay tuned for more great programming here on WMNF. We'll see you next week. Again, 2 weeks from now, we're going to do that special Tampa City Council election debate from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Thanks so much for listening.